7:30.
Hi Sarah, thanks for having me on.
This is a very big moment, in particular after the successes at the last election. It's tempting to blame the major parties for ganging up on you, but how much of the blame for losing do you take on yourself?
Obviously not the outcome that I wanted, and we'll do a review and see what lessons there are that we can learn. But look, it is the case that in these lower house seats, we're for the Greens to win and hold it, we have to overcome the combined might of Labor and Liberal working together, and in this case, in Melbourne, one nation as well. And it's an Everest to climb, and we've climbed it a few times, but this time we didn't quite get there. And as I say, others over the period will work out what lessons that we can learn from this. But we have, over the last, this election and the election before, under my leadership, the election before we got the highest ever vote that we've had. We're now in sole balance of power in the Senate, and I think that we're the Greens in a position now in the coming Parliament to, I think, push the government now to start to act on some of the crises that were really, I guess, elevated during the election campaign.
In your seat in Melbourne, however, the primary vote is down. More people in Melbourne wanted their preferences to go to Labor. What of your policies do you think drove that?
Yeah, look, I think there were three things that probably affected us in Melbourne. One is there was a change to the boundaries, and a lot of the Green, there were areas in the north where a lot of people voted Greens that were taken out of the electorate, and we gained some great areas in the south of the river, but didn't really have a lot of time to build the kind of deep connection that we had with others. The second thing, I think, probably, yes, there was a dip in the primary vote, and certainly I spent a bit of time on the booths, and the main feedback that I was getting is people coming up saying, well, look, I wanted to keep Dutton out, and so this time I voted Labor. And I think during the course of the campaign, I think we saw over those 5 weeks, I think we saw with Dutton being aligned so closely with Trump, I think Labor ran quite a good campaign about wanting to make sure that Dutton-Trump politics was kept out of Australia. We did as well, but I think certainly the feedback I got was people telling us that they, even though they've been regular Greens voters, they actually shifted this time. But the third thing I think in Melbourne, as I say, is preferences. It is the case that now, even though we got the highest vote, it'll be one nation and Liberal preferences that do get Labor over the line.
Now, in Queensland, of course, you've had losses there as well, and you're down in the seats where you needed to be competitive. So let's talk about the impact of your own policies rather than other people's policies. How damaging was Max Chandler-Mather's embrace of the CFMEU?
Oh, look, I think people in Griffith knew that Max was in their corner and was going to fight for what's right. And I think the seat of Griffith, interestingly now, like the seat of Melbourne, we've got the Greens and the Teals, and now we've got the Purples. We've got we've got Labor MPs who now owe their political existence to Liberal Party preferences. And
just coming back, though, to your own decisions, the decisions made by Greens, was it a tactical misjudgment that, in this case, I'm referring to Max Chandler-Mather's embrace of the CFMEU? Was it a tactical misjudgment because it aligned you in the voters' minds with union thuggery?
Oh, well, look, there'll be others who, I'll leave others to make the decisions about the analysis and the reasons why. But I mean, I do, repeat the point that the things that we were campaigning on, including in Griffith, where Max gave up a portion of his salary to ensure that there were free meals for school children and so on, the things that we were campaigning on, the housing crisis, the climate crisis, the growing inequality crisis in Australia, these crises are only going to get worse. And we did manage to, and Max, for example, managed to get renters on the agenda this election in a way they haven't been before, and first home buyers as well. But I do think that the issues that we were talking about, like the fact that we've now, as I spoke to you about on your program before, the fact that we've now got generations who are saying they're priced out of ever owning a home, and there's some big changes that we need to start talking about in Australia. I think they were the right things to put on the table.
And yet here you are in a position where you, the leader, has lost his seat and the party has gone backwards. So looking at the reasons again for that, on housing, were you targeting too narrow a base? Do you regret blocking Labor on housing and on the establishment of an environmental protection agency in the last term of Parliament?
Well, I mean, just take those two issues. Labor's legislation got passed, and because of our pressure, we got an extra $3.5 billion for public and community housing. Like, the government wasn't going to spend any money on public housing in the last term of Parliament, and we managed to get some money going out the door. And on the environment laws, like, I think, and there's a bit of rewriting of history going on from Labor there, because you'll also remember that it was the WA Labor Premier Roger Cook was proudly boasting in the national newspapers that he managed to kill the deal and stop any negotiations that were happening.
I think the issue is, the question is around whether or not you delayed for too long. So on the government's housing policies last year, there was a very long delay, and you were held responsible for holding up those policies. Did you push too hard for too long?
Look, we got the government to the point where they started modelling changes on negative gearing and capital gains tax in a way that we said, look, these are the real issues affecting us, and we are really worried that we're becoming a society where young people, even if you do all the right things and all the things that are asked of you, it becomes impossible to afford the basics. And I think that is something that wasn't on the political agenda before, and now it is. And I think, like, in this next Parliament, where the Greens are in sole balance of power in the Senate on the projections, and the government's now got a big majority, I think some of these things that I think probably some even in the government know have to be looked at. We have to tackle some of these big issues.
Bringing it back to the Greens, do you accept responsibility for the nature of your policies, but also the way you presented your policies in that last Parliament? Let me ask you a specific question about that. You said that Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese were guilty of genocide in Gaza. Was that too divisive?
I didn't say that, and we were really clear about just saying we were pushing for peace, and we oppose the invasion, and still do, and think that the only way that Palestinians and Israelis are going to have a just and lasting peace is by ending the invasion and by ending the occupation. But look, on the whole, of course, as the leader of the party, I put forward the platform. I take primary responsibility. Of course, that's my role as leader. But again, coming back to that point about our vote, I think what happened this election was that there was now close to 13% of people voting Greens, millions of people voting Greens, and some people didn't in the House because they wanted to keep out Peter Dutton. Who
should lead the party going forward?
Look, I think any of those members of our party room are capable of doing it. I'm not going to be one who now offers unsolicited advice from the sidelines. I think one of the things about the Greens that isn't always necessarily recognised is that they're all effectively front benches. They're all shadow front benches in there. And in one of the things about being, I guess, a smaller party is that the people who are there have to take on responsibility for holding the government to account on so many areas, and they're all just incredibly capable people, and I'm going to leave that up to them.
Any personal regrets for you?
Oh, look, I guess the highlight was getting the carbon price legislation through, back in 2000 in that first Parliament. We actually did something. We worked with the government. We actually got something that actually started bringing down pollution in this country. And as someone who, the reason I got into this is I quit my job and started running in elections because of the climate crisis, and I wanted to see action on it. So it felt incredibly good. It was really difficult to see that then torn down. I think probably a regret is this time I do wish that we managed to get the government a bit further on climate. The pollution's not coming down in the way that it needs to, and I genuinely worry about what the future will hold for my kids, and I think other people share the same view. And so I do wish we'd been able to get the government to the point of not opening new coal and gas mines, but I think these crises, like the climate crisis, the housing crisis, the inequality crisis, I think they're only going to get worse unless government acts.
Adam Bandt, it's been an extraordinary journey for you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, especially today.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. And can I say, look, thanks for the opportunity over the years. I think there is a real hunger amongst people in this country for getting into some of the meat of some of the policy issues and talking about what it is that governments can do to tackle the big crises that we're facing. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity of being able to talk about those over the years.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.